Hi guys, welcome to Cover to Cover. I'm Dave.
I'm Wendell.
And this week we're talking about The Chosen, Season 2, Episode 4. We started doing this, a little over 3 or 4 months ago, going through The Chosen.
Yeah.
So far it's been a pretty enjoyable ride. And if you like what we're doing, guys, like, share, subscribe. Leave your comments down below. We like to have conversations with people and talk about Bible scripture. And with that, we'll get started.
Smash that like button.
All right, guys. So in this first clip, we wanted to talk about Simon the Zealot. And so the Zealots were a political group back in the time, and they fought against Roman occupation historically. I don't know that they were doing it specifically during this time frame individually, but it is noted throughout history that they were a sect that were radicals and wanted to alleviate occupation in Israel. So at the beginning of the show, the Bible mentions Simon the Zealot, and in the show it kind of links him with Jesse, who they've named as the guy beside the Pool of Bethesda.
Yeah.
So they've kind of like merged these two things together. The Bible doesn't really do that, but again, they have to kind of set a scene to draw out storylines.
Yeah, we did kind of want to point out that connection is not in the Bible, but maybe.
If you want to read about where Simon the Zealot is located in the Bible, he's located in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Acts. And he was a missionary in Egypt after the death of Jesus and resurrection. He was martyred in Persia. Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that, like, the guy at the Pool of Bethesda and Simon really didn't have a link in the Bible. It's kind of weird to see that the creative side of the show kind of link those two.
Yeah.
But it also adds context to the episode where you're watching both storylines happen simultaneously to an end of Jesus really intervening on both accounts.
Right. Now, the Zealots really was a thing that really was about being against Rome. That is true.
Yes, they were against anyone occupying Israel.
Right.
That is historically documented.
Yeah.
So
On both sides of both sides of history. So like that was really a thing. This first clip is kind of the training of the Zealot, Simon. So we just figured we'd kind of throw it in there.
Yeah, it kind of starts out with the connection between the Jesse at the Pool of Bethesda and Simon the Zealot.
Right.
It kind of goes through them being brothers and then separated, and then you see and Simon go through training.
Yeah. All right, so let's check it out. I am Haru of the Takagora Dojo. That would be so sad, man.
And this is Jesse by the pool.
Can you imagine? Boy, I'd be tripping everybody. If you're in arm's reach, you're getting tripped. You're catching a hangnail.
Now, this clip here reminds me of like old Greco-Roman style wrestling.
Yeah, he's John Wick in that thing.
Which was it's very popular during that area in that time. Okay, so it shows Jesse going through his training, and it shows this knife, them doing knife training. It's called a sikha, which is a dagger that they used. It's easily concealable within your robes so that you were able to assassinate or other things without being you won't carry a sword. That's really hard to conceal. So
True.
they carried daggers of a certain length, and they were curved so that they curved around your body. And I thought that was interesting to point out. The Arabs also had similar kind of blades that they used for the same exact reason. Like the Arabs and Jewish people, they shared a lot of the same kind of the sects and the different divisional groups that stood out, radicals in a sense. And so they had a certain level of laws that they lived by, and usually they were very strict about those laws. They could only do certain things. They were only allowed to do certain things. And compared to, I don't want to use the word cult, but very much kind of that way of thinking, kind of like military almost.
Yeah, very similar in thought process, just the methods may change a little bit.
Right. But even like the Pharisees protected the Jewish law, generally a sect of like the Zealots were that law to another level. Like it was like way stricter on some of the things, and they held it by the letter to the letter. And it was kind of its own belief system almost. That's it's if you can, but we can believe the same things, but to do two different degrees. And that's kind of the way, certain sects like the Zealots, that's kind of the way they were. They believed in Jewish religion, Moses' law, but it was to like the letter of the law. Like there is no exception. There is no breaking the rule. There is no reasonable anything. It is do it or don't come back, or you're not part of us anymore, or death.
Yeah, and in the show, he kind of abandons his entire family to follow that training and all that stuff there. So it's kind of interesting, but it is fictional.
Yeah, so I mean, him being a zealot is biblically documented. The Zealots as a sect is historically documented.
Right.
The story of him and the guy by the pool being brother, all of that's kind of like creative liberties to kind of intertwine the storylines to make an episode.
Yeah.
But I mean, I thought it was interesting learning about actually who the Zealots were and what they fought for.
Yeah. All right, guys. So in this next clip, we're going to talk about the feast a little bit and kind of what they're preparing for. So you kind of see the disciples and the followers that are with the disciples, being Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and a few others that are following. They're not necessarily disciples, but they are followers. So you see all of them building this structure, and they're kind of in this clip, this next clip here, they're kind of talking about why they're doing the structure, and what it kind of represents, which I think is pretty interesting. This is a natural and annually Jewish thing that they celebrate. They've celebrated it for years, and they still celebrate it to this day. So I think it's kind of interesting that they put things like this in there, because I believed it to be accurate. I mean, Jesus talks about it in the Bible. It's mentioned a couple different times in the Bible. Let's watch the clip, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Really? How is that possible? My father never took me and my mother to the feasts.
This is your first Feast of the Tabernacles?
No, this is just my first time in Jerusalem.
Tabernacle is a temporary dwelling.
It's a tent. I know what the tabernacle is. So what? Do we have to build one to eat?
Mm-hmm.
I was being facetious.
God said to live in a booth for 7 days during this feast, to commemorate how the children of Israel lived in temporary shelters for 40 years in the desert.
Still out.
One of 3 pilgrimage holidays. For every able-bodied Israelite male who traveled to Jerusalem and present himself before Adonai. You really don't know about any of this stuff?
I've already admitted that I don't know all of it. I didn't pay much attention. I do recall my father used to leave 3 times a year.
Why is it only the men are required to go?
It can be a perilous journey, difficult for children and the sick, people who need caretakers, but it doesn't prohibit anyone. I've taken Eden many times.
So in the clip, you hear them talk about what it represents.
Yeah.
Again, guys, if you want to read about the Feast of the Tabernacle, it's in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Leviticus 23 and Deuteronomy 16.
Yep.
But it's talking about, she asked the question, why is it only the men?
Right.
But if you imagine if you had a long journey to take, right, the more things you took, if it's not to say that it's a burden or whatever, but if you had to travel like a super long distance, the risks involved in doing that back then.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, especially if you had children, small children, or even bigger children. I mean, that's going to be a difficult journey for the women and the children. It's difficult for men, so it's a very modern question.
Yeah,
and that's fine. I'm okay with it. But what I think's cool and what I think is interesting is there's 2 different times, and again, this is completely. It's completely embellished, but the fact that they point out where Matthew's asking questions here, and then there's a spot later on where he asks questions about it, which kind of just shows his I don't mean this badly, but it kind of shows his ignorance to the customs, because he worked for Rome. So
yeah, and it's stuff like that though that's weird to me. I think him still being Jewish though, to some degree,
yeah,
he probably knew about a lot of the stuff.
I feel like he would have.
I don't think you can kind of get around that. I understand they did it from a creative thing, but I just feel like their culture was so ingrained with tradition that it would be hard for you to not understand what the Sabbath is, or not understand what a feast is for, or, because you've been doing it for pretty much your whole life.
Yeah.
If you're Jewish. So
yeah, now he did the, he did, well, remember when they did the Sabbath episode, he did understand what Sabbath was. But this is a yearly festival, so he wasn't as up to date on why they did it and what it represented and all that stuff. I do like the fact that he's trying to gain that knowledge at this point. I think that's cool. He asked a question later in the episode about the structure itself, and he talks about the palm branches they're not going to like block out the rain, and they're going to just provide shade. Well, that was actually the purpose, that it was supposed to be temporary shelter. The roof was designed with materials to let the rain in, but keep shade on the people that was inside of the temporary shelter.
So keep the sun out.
Right. So I think it's really cool. I really like the symbolism and the remembrance of, what God did for the Israelites and things. I think that's really cool.
And all of this happened during the Exodus.
Yes.
So this is a remembrance of them leaving Egypt, which goes back to last season when they were golden serpent on the...
Yeah.
So this is all throwback stuff to Old Testament books of Moses, kind of tradition.
Yeah, and then Matthew even points out a few different times that the difference. You know what I mean? Like the parts where he's like, he don't know what's going on. So they're kind of trying to educate him.
All right, guys. So in this last clip, this is the Pool of Bethesda, and this is where Jesse has been sitting at for years. He's been there for years. The Bible says that every so often an angel would come down and trouble the waters.
Yes.
And then the first person to be dipped in the water would be healed of their affliction. So there are a number of people around this pool.
Yeah. Yeah, there are. And this guy had been there for, like you said, years, trying to get healed. You can imagine the struggles that he goes through. We're talking over 2 decades.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a long time. And he's like, he had to be at the end of his rope, because him and Jesus have this conversation, and he's like, every time I go to get in the water, somebody jumps in front of me. I have nobody to dip me in the pool. Which is it's really sad. Like, a lot of these things that they've kind of portrayed throughout this episode was to that end of showing his loss of hope throughout the years and the time. At this point, he just lives there.
Yeah, and you got to imagine too, if you've been beaten down, it even happens today, right? So if you're down and out for a long period of time, bitterness tends to set in.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you're not only frustrated with your circumstance, you're bitter towards everyone else who you view as having it better than you. So
Yeah.
it's not even an inward, just an inward emotion. It's now an outward emotion. You're projecting that out of you now.
Yeah.
So you kind of act short with people because you're frustrated with your certain circumstance.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a very human trait. And it's easy to turn that bitterness towards God. A lot of times now it happens towards a church, and then it ends up God catches the brunt of it after the church hurts us or whatever. We tend to blame God, which is, it's weird, but it's understandable. I understand it. It's just God is not that entity.
Well, and just also, like, if you're down and out, like you're really struggling, and we talked about this in an earlier episode with Peter.
Mm-hmm.
You've lost hope. You don't have any hope.
Yeah.
Right? There's no out for you. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel anymore. So you feel trapped in your circumstance.
Oh yeah.
And so that can be a real thing. Like, that can be a real moment for you to like, God, Jesus is hope. He is the hope that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one thing to fail, and it's one thing to stumble and fall and whatever. But like, when you lose hope, that's kind of the end. A lot of people don't come back from that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough place to be. It really is. So let's watch this clip and see what happens.
Shalom.
Me?
Yes.
Shalom.
I have a question for you.
For me.
Wonder how long
I
he's
don't
felt
have-
invisible.
Many answers. But I'm listening.
Do you want to be healed?
Who are you?
We'll get to that later. But my question remains.
Will you take me to the water?
Okay, so my first interaction with this was Jesus approaches him and asks him, do you want to be healed? Now, this is the first time anyone has offered him hope in years.
Yeah.
And the first thing he says is, are you here to dip me in the pool? Are you here to do it my way?
Yeah.
You know, like he had already had his version of hope worked out in his mind. And this was how it was going to go. Like he had already planned it out, like, oh, I'm going to get in the water, and oh, then I'll get what And Jesus walks by and was like, do you want it? And he's like, are you here to do it my way? And Jesus is like, no. It's like,
Yeah, well, he was unaware there was another way.
correct. Correct.
That was just, that's a good point. It's a really good interaction between the two here, and this is exactly how it reads. Once they start interacting with one another, sometimes when you reach that point of loss of hope, it's almost scary to start hoping, because you know what that disappointment feels
You're
like.
scared of the disappointment. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but this guy is like, yes, I want to be healed.
Yeah. So another thing that kind of strikes me about it is the physical aspect of it. Like, he had enough faith in this thing, but when Jesus comes, he doesn't recognize that hope is standing right in front of him. Like, it's right there for the taking. That is a very human thing that we do. Divided attention is something humans struggle with. That's why you're not supposed to text and drive and stuff.
Huh?
So if you're this thing, you have all this faith and stuff in this one thing. When someone offers you faith from a different direction, sometimes you don't get it because you're so focused on this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could watch some more of this, but like, that is off the top hit me. It's like hope is standing right in front of you, guy, and you're too blind to see it.
Yeah.
And by the way, the guy wasn't blind. He was paralyzed. So
Right. You want to finish the clip?
Sure.
Look, I'm having a really bad day.
You've been having a bad day for a long time.
Excuse.
So?
Sir, I have no one to help me into the water when it's stirred up. And when I do get close, the others step down in front of me.
Excuse.
And so,
Look at me.
Broken.
Look at me. That's not what I asked.
I don't care about your
I'm not asking
excuses.
you about who's helping you, or who's not helping, or who's getting in your way. I'm asking about you.
I've tried.
For a long time, I know. And you don't want false hope again, I understand. But this pool, it has nothing for you. It means nothing. And you know it. But you're still here. Why?
I don't know.
Where's he gonna go?
You don't need this pool.
So that got me choked up a little bit. This guy's, and I did this before I came to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I did this. So I knew where to go. I knew how to find Jesus. But I came up with every excuse in the book. And when Jesus is like, I don't care about any of those excuses, like, that hits home to me, like, really hits home.
Yeah.
Guys, there's no excuse. There's, like, he'll change you. Like, Jesus will change you. So the excuses is very human of us, but in the end, it doesn't matter. What matters is your walk with him. That's what matters.
Yeah, the greatest thing about it is, and the sooner you can accept and realize the fact that you are not worthy, none of us are, it's freely given. So all you have to do is receive it.
Jesus tells him, he asks him, do you want to be healed?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a yes or no answer. Okay? You don't need an excuse. Do you want it? If you want it, we're doing it my way.
He's scared to say he wants it because he knows that equals
responsibility,
hope, and
yeah,
that's scary for him. And Jesus even says that. The Bible dialogue is slightly different, but I think the main points are really driven home here. Number one, he does want his healing. Number two, he's been in this state for a long time. And number three, he walks away from this encounter with his bed in his hand.
On the Sabbath.
I'm telling you, if somebody did that for me and said, pick up your bed and walk, I'm just going to never put down my bed and continue walking. That's just...
Yeah, this whole interaction that they do in this episode is quite biblically accurate.
Oh, yeah.
It's the way it's written about him picking up his bed, and it's the Sabbath, and them questioning. Like, all of that is in there. If you want to read about this, it is in John chapter 5. And it's a great story. It's shorter than the interaction that you're seeing on screen. They kind of... When you add things to make it theatrical, you kind of have to like make it work, you know, dialogue wise.
Yeah.
And they really kept it within a really tight boundary on this story.
Yeah, I did want to point out a little bit that one of them tells them it's a pagan symbol. The
pool.
Yeah, because what they went by was the Greek word that was used for the Bible's translation to English. The Greek word used in this instance was slightly different. There was a word that they used for Asclepius.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, we talked about him in earlier episodes.
Yep.
There was a word that they used when they believed Asclepius healed somebody. And then there was a word that they used when someone was washed or cleaned. It was a different word.
Yeah, and so the Pool of Bethesda was thought to be a cleansing pool. It had two pools. One was an actual washing pool that you would wash and cleanse yourself for rituals. And the other pool was basically a water reservoir that flushed the bathing pool clean and kept it clean. So it basically, you think of an aerator or something that keeps moving water. It helps keep it clean. It kind of filtered one out of the other. So one had a feed and the other one had a dump, and it just run off that kept the water clean, but it was used for ritual bathing is what I researched.
Yeah, and I just thought I just think it's interesting. There's some good stuff in this episode. Even around the some of the fictional stuff, it's okay. But I still think it's a good episode.
Yeah, the interaction between Jesus and Jesse is really it shows both sides. One is a spiritual side, and that would be Jesus talking to him, and the other one is a very human side, which is this crushed guy.
Yeah.
And trying to, he looks up and it's he can't see hope when hope's standing in front of him, and that is very, like, I can relate to that, very much so.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So in this episode, we see Simon, the Pool of Bethesda, the Feast of the Tabernacle.
Mm-hmm.
We see a couple of other storylines kind of going on with the Pharisees and them running across a previously known Pharisee, like the guy knew the disciples.
Yeah.
We kind of get it kind of like sets a stage for maybe something in the future happening.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know yet. What did you think about this episode?
I thought it was okay. I wasn't. It wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't my least favorite either. I felt okay with it. It was had some really good parts. Had some Bible in it. So I'm good with that.
So I thought this episode was a little, like, the way it opened was a little strange. Because if you watch the episode, the first 10 minutes or something, there's no dialogue. It is simply a montage, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little different. Like, they haven't done that before in this series.
Yeah, and I feel like if you didn't know the Bible, you would be completely lost during that montage.
Yeah, well, luckily it kind of explains it as the episode goes on, but it's like 10, it's like 8 minutes or something at the beginning where there's no dialogue. It's just actions and like some music playing in the background. They haven't really done a format like that in this miniseries yet.
Yeah.
Everything flashback or flash forward or whatever has always had some dialogue to where you could kind of place it. So you don't really, like, you see what's unfolding and it's self-explanatory, but you don't know the characters' names and things until, they start talking or you get into the episode.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting, like, if you've not read the script, if you've not read the story in the Bible, and then you saw this episode, what was your thoughts on it? Like, what did you think about it? Stick it in the comments, and we'll see if we can start a discussion. I think it's really cool. Like, it was really, it wasn't a bad episode. Again, not my favorite, but not my worst either.
When you go for like 8 minutes or 10 minutes or something with no dialogue, we're like a third of the way through the episode before we start gaining context.
Yeah, I'm doing something else at that point.
I love the historical value with the way the Zealots are portrayed, and the Sicarii, which was like a splinter of the Zealots, is like a splinter sect of the Zealots who were assassins. I do like how some of that's portrayed. Rome seems, I don't mean to sound pessimistic here, but Rome seems a little weak in some of the episodes.
Yeah,
where
I feel like the rule was like way more definite.
Yeah, like Rome they went to all lengths to crush rebellions. They would not stand for any kind of military action against a Roman anything. But I feel like Rome, in this sense, in a couple of episodes actually, I feel like Rome would have reacted a lot harsher to some of the things that have popped up. For some of the things Rome did, the crucifixion's probably not the worst thing Rome did. I mean, as bad as it was, it may have not been the worst punishment Rome dished out.
No, they had some really, really gruesome things.
They did some gory stuff with prisoners.
Yeah, if you want to look into it on your own time, it's not really something I think we need to get into on the show itself. But it was awful.
Yeah, you didn't want to mess with Rome.
It was awful.
Rome was like,
Rome don't play no games.
Yeah.
All right, so season 2, episode 4. What would you grade this episode?
I'm gonna go either a B+, because it's definitely better than some of the previous episodes as far as content.
Right.
So I'll definitely go either a B+ or an A-.
Okay.
Like it's within that range.
Okay.
What would yours?
My grade for the episode, I'm just gonna have to say a solid B. It had some high points. It also had some points that I didn't particularly agree with, but it's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. I thought it was a good solid B.
Okay. So guys, remember next week we are doing The Chosen season 2 episode 5. So we're looking forward to doing that.
And we are over halfway done with season 2.
We hit the halfway mark today. So
that's right.
Stick around for that. We love you guys. Join us next week. If you have a comment, leave it below. Smash the notification.
That's right.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.